To start, a nominal exchange rate is the value of one's country's currency in terms of another country's currency. Simple example is, let's say we're comparing the Canadian dollar and the Japanese yen. We can get an exchange rate of, let's say, like 100 yen to $1. And we could also change the scenario so that we're looking at how many Canadian dollars it takes to buy 1 yen. This would end up equally to 0.01 Canadian dollars to 1 yen. And if we change the exchange rate to, let's say, 200 yen to $1, the dollar worth would now increase by 2 times as much as what it would be if the exchange rate was 100 yen to a dollar. Now let's look at this through the eyes of buyers and sellers. If somebody in Canada were to purchase something from Japan and it costs 200,000 yen, when the exchange rate is 100 yen to $1, that person would basically be buying the item for 2,000 Canadian dollars. Whereas if the exchange rate was 200 yen to a dollar, the individual would now be buying the item for only 1,000 Canadian dollars. This certain individual would end up saving money when the exchange rates are 200 yen to $1. And so as a result, when an individual is purchasing something from Japan, they would prefer a higher Japanese yen relative to the Canadian dollar. Now, let's take a look through the seller's point of view. We'll say somebody in Canada is selling a product to somebody else in Japan. If they have the product listed for 200,000 yen, the seller would then receive 20 million Canadian dollars when the exchange rate is $0.01 to 1 yen. So we get this 20 mil from a simple equation. It's cost divided by the exchange rate, which would be 200,000 divided by 0.01. And so if the exchange rate changed to, let's say, something like 0.005 Canadian to 1 yen, to calculate the amount the seller receives, now we would do 200,000 divided by 0.005, which would then give us 40 million Canadian. From this little example, it's clear that a seller would favor having the Canadian dollar low relative to the Japanese yen. And now in terms of the question, would a low or high Canadian dollar relative to the US dollar be beneficial for Suncor Energy? So from looking at the example, we can see that a seller would always prefer to have the currency being low relative to the other currency. And since we know this, we can always assume that Suncor would want a low Canadian dollar relative to the US dollar.